Hey fam, it's ST Tech. Today we are doing 18 CKA style practice labs. For each task, I'll explain the concepts, launch a tiny sandbox with my script, do the hands-on steps, verify and reset. I'm in KillerCoda, but you can use any cluster. Let's cook. First thing I do, just like in the exam, is get the starting environment ready. I already have a script called setup underscore scenario underscore only dot sh that generates a scenario test environment and creates all the objects for question 1 to 18. And for everyone practicing along with me, you can also get the exact code and scripts I used to generate these exam ready scenarios. I've uploaded everything neatly on my website so you can download it and spin up your own environment instantly, just like I'm doing in this tutorial. Because creating these scripts took a lot of hours, testing, and real exam experience, access is available for a small token of appreciation. Your support helps me keep building more tools, more labs, and more step by step resources to make your CKA journey easier. If you want to practice exactly the way I did and be fully ready for the exam, grab the code from my website and start launching your own scenarios today. Let's get the environment ready by going to Kubernetes documentation page to open the cheat sheet and grab the command to set our environment. Shortcut. Because you don't need to be typing kubectl command over and over because time management is very important. In KillerCoda VI, to this folder, copy and paste the script on my PDF documentation. I also have it as .sh in my zip file bundle that can open in Visual Studio Code. So copy and paste. Save in this path, then run the chmod command to give permission. Alright, let's start with question 1. In my real CK exam, I had a very similar task, but in my case, they asked me to add TLSv1.2 support. In this practice question, we're doing the reverse because they interchange the question. But same idea, we have TLSv1.2 and TLSv1.3. And we must update the NGINX ConfigMap so that only TLS version 1.3 is allowed. The question says, there is a deployment called NGINX static in the NGINX static namespace. It uses a config map called NGINX config. I must update that config map so that only TLS v1.3 is allowed, and then use this command to test curl tls-max 1.2 https:// web.k8s.local/. That command should fail because TLS 1.2 must no longer be accepted. In this demo, I'm using KillerCoda for my lab, and I already have a helper script that generates the full scenario for me. You can use any Kubernetes cluster, but I'll show you with KillerCoda so you can follow along easily. This command creates the namespace, the NGINX deployment, the service, and the NGINX config map. Let's quickly inspect what we've got. With our kubectl commands, we check the namespace, the deployment, and the config map. Here, you can see the NGINX config map. In my practice environment, I start with both TLS versions allowed. You'll see something like SSL properties, TLSv1.2, TLSv1.3. In your real exam, the value might be different. The key idea is you're always editing this SSL underscore protocols directive. In the real exam, most of the time, the NGINX and TLS wiring is already in place. To make the demo meaningful in this lab, I'm going to very quickly wire NGINX to use a self-signed certificate, listen on port 443, and load the configuration from this config map. You don't have to memorize all of this for the exam. Focus more on the config map editing part. This just makes the call test work. So run this command. I just generated a self-signed TLS certificate and put it in a secret called WebTLS inside the NGINX static namespace. Now create an NGINX SSL server block in the config map. So execute this command. Here, I recreate the config map so it contains a full ssl.conf server block. Notice the line SSL protocols, TLSv1.2, TLSv1.3. That's the line we'll later change to only TLSv1.3. Now, mount this config map and the TLS secret into the deployment with this command. And expose port 443 in the service with this command. Now the deployment mounts our TLS config and certificate, and the service exposes port 443 so we can test HTTPS. Before we change anything, I always like to test the current behavior so I know my change actually did something. So we are going to use call-resolve so we don't fight /etc/hosts by executing this command. Here I'm using -resolve to tell call use this cluster IP for web.katest.local on port 443. The -k flag just ignores the self-signed set. Right now, this command succeeds because TLS 1.2 is still allowed. Now we do the actual exam task. Update the config map so that only TLSv1.3 is allowed. In the exam, I usually dump the YAML file to another file created by me. Run the kubectl apply-f command because the kubectl edit command usually throws error, although it's fast and you don't have to save extra files. Scroll down to the ssl.conf section. Find the SSL underscore protocols line and change it from SSL protocols TLSv1.2 TLSv1.3 to SSL.protocols TLSv1.3. But in my own exam case, I had to add TLSv1.2. Go to the metadata and do the same changes in that section. Add the immutable section to true, then save and exit. Config maps are not automatically reloaded by containers. In the exam, you almost always have to restart or roll out the deployment so it picks up the new config map values. So run kubectl-n $ns rollout restart deploy NGINX static. I use rollout restart to force a new pod with the updated configuration, and I wait until it's successfully rolled out. Finally, we run the same call command the exam gave us. Remember, they specifically say call -tls-max 1.2 https://web.katest.local should fail. That's our success criteria. Now, this command should fail because the server only accepts TLSv1.3, and we're telling curl to use a maximum of TLS1.2. In some cases, you'll see an error like protocol version not supported. That's exactly what we want. Then let's test TLS 1.3. If I increase the max TLS version to 1.3, the request succeeds again. That confirms our ConfigMap change is working. Wrap up for question 1. So that's question 1. The key idea is simple. Find the right config map, adjust the SSL protocols directive, restart the deployment, use the provided curl commands to validate the behavior. In my own CKA exam, I had the mirror version of this. They wanted me to add TLS 1.2 support instead of removing it, but the pattern is exactly the same. In the next question, we'll move to Gateway API and migrate an existing ingress to a gateway plus HTTP route.